Lady Dimitrescu's three daughters, Daniela, Cassandra, and Bella. Now, these three girls that he fight in the castle Dimitrescu, House Dimitrescu, that is, as the first mini bosses of the game. Now, these three girls isn't how they used to be. They were quite humane, I may say. They were human-like and normal person. They were actually royalties at that time. As you can see in the picture, this seems pretty royal to me. That's my speculation at the very least. Now, if you went ahead and read a few notes in the game, you might know pretty well how they came to be. But if you didn't, then let me just tell you. So, one day, Lady Dimitrescu got these three girls from Mother Miranda, and she being Lady Dimitrescu and her being Mother Miranda, they wanted to make these three into some special kind of BOW. Now, Lady Dimitrescu performed a few experiments on them, in which on the first day a fly came out of the eldest one, that is Bella, and then she tried to examine the fly. She went ahead and performed some experiments on the said fly and found out that these flies are totally unable to reproduce and they need flesh to stay alive. Now, since these flies are in the bodies of the three girls, they chew up the girls literally and feast on them. So as time went by, their bodies started to collapse and decompose. Now, there was just a husk of a human eye, or more so, a human-shaped sludge that was left. Now, few days went by, and then the sludge kind of started to take a human form, and on the face and the lips, mostly the body of the human, started to change color. The face became pale white, whilst the lips became crimson deep red. Now, keep in mind that these are pseudo-vampiric insects. They are a hybrid of both of them, so they need blood and fresh meat to survive, and the fresh meat being the maids or the visitors that came to the village. Now, as we move further on, the experiment went by, and once Lady Dimitrescu tried to open the window and found out that these flies, these insects, are pretty vulnerable to low temperatures. Exactly, that is 10 degrees Celsius. If it's anything lower than 10 degrees, their metabolism will collapse and they will go in a kind of cryogenic sleep. And I'm pretty sure I butchered more than just vulnerability. So, next on. Now, Lady Dimitrescu, or Lady D, being herself, performed further experiments on them, and then on the sixth day, they woke up like newborn children. She looked at them, she felt a connection between them. So she adopted them as her, daughters. And in the game we see quite different personalities of these three. That is, first, Daniela, the youngest one. She has a green pendant. Now, all three of them can be identified with their pendants or their voices. I'm saying pendant, it's a necklace. And Cassandra being the youngest but also the craziest, as you can find in one of those notes of the maids. She sliced the face of Adela when she made a mistake. So you can imagine a person who would slice a person's face just because they made a mistake. I just can. Now, moving on to the next daughter, that is Cassandra. Now, Cassandra is the middle child. She is quite scared, but also loves to torture people. As in the opening scene, you can see that she enjoys when Ethan is in pain. And now, the last but not the least, Bella. Bella, being the eldest of them, she has a tough personality. She's smart, as you can see in her fight. She tries to close the windows that Ethan opens in an attempt to save herself, but ultimately fails. Now, these three daughters had something in common, and that was they needed fresh meat and blood to survive. Now, if you remember that I called them an insectoid vampire hybrid, that is because the insects do not reproduce. They feed on the flesh and they swarm around the prey to eat it. And as you can see that when the wind is blowing, they do not swarm, and that is because they are trying to heat themselves up. Now, something similar happens with the bees too. Bees try to heat up their prey by forming around them. They try to, form a vacuum in an area just to heat it up. And the flies were trying to do the same thing, but instead of being able to heal themselves by heating themselves, they ultimately froze in place, forming a statue of the said girl. Now, after the fight, you might notice the girl leaves the crystal torso. Now I'm going to talk about that too. Now, basically, if you've played the DLC End of Zoe, you might recognize this crystal torso a bit, because in that DLC, Zoe was also covered in the similar type of crystals. Now, my speculation is that when a certain BOW is about to die, they crystallize in either in an attempt to save themselves, or it is just how their death happens. Now, some BOW just dissolve in the air and some crystallize, like the Dimitrescus sisters. And when you look at it this way, that they practically froze before they die, it might also be the reason for the crystal torso. But for me, I think it's a way for the virus to decompose. And what can I say? It is pretty expensive. So, last but not the least, the Kadu. Now, I will talk further about the Kadu in another video because it deserves one of its own. But basically, a Kadu is the egg that produced the flies by which the three daughters were made, and it is one of the main storyline of the game. So, what did we learn? The three daughters' origin, how they behave, and how their end comes out, like why do they crystallize and stuff. And basically what I'm trying to say is these three daughters are quite extensively integrated in the storyline of Lady D, because she also reacts to the deaths in a certain way, if you have seen it. Now, Lady D has an emotional connection with them, as a literal mother and daughter. So you can imagine how it goes when we, the protagonist, kill them. So that's it for this video, and if you liked it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want. I'll be sure to upload a few more and stuff, and until then, bye bye and see you later.